Hi everyone, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. I hope you've had a good day today and it was beautiful and sunny here today. I think we might get a few sprinkles tomorrow, which that would be okay too. We need some rain. So we're going to continue on our book, City Bears Adventures. We're already on chapter 11, Lights, Camera, Action. So let's begin the story. The first day of shooting, now remember, shooting in this case means making their movie. The first day of shooting started out great for DJ. He was so excited at seeing famous movie stars walking around that he didn't mind what happened to him. He was fitted with buckskin pants. So buckskin pants would be like leather pants, real leather, not the type that he wore out into the woods that was just very dirty, but real leather. Buckskin pants and a jacket and a coonskin cap for his part as an early American frontier boy. I want to say that when my two youngest boys were little, I made them one year pretend buckskin clothes and a coon hat. Of course, it was all pretend. None of it was with real fur or real leather, but it looked pretty good, and they had so much fun wearing that. So, but this boy's getting to wear the real thing. The wardrobe people took up the slack in the too big jacket by pinning it together at the back seam. That wasn't so bad because the famous male star was having the same things done to his fancy dress coat. There was a disappointment for many of DJ's friends. The Chamber of Commerce at the county seat in Indian Springs had been flooded with requests for area people to have parts as extras. But only a handful of people got roles, and those were all adults. The only child's part went to DJ because of his bear. Kathy and Alfred were unable to get parts. Kathy had said it really didn't matter to her, and Alfred honestly didn't want to be in the movie unless he had a role with Coco. DJ wished Alfred had been allowed to come with him so they could laugh together at DJ's costume. But when the makeup people began brushing DJ's face with makeup or cosmetics so the bright lights from the would not reflect off his nose and forehead, the boy was glad none of his friends could see him. He didn't want to have them see him get makeup put on. When DJ was ready, a young man led the mountain boy through the old warehouse. The wooden floor looked like a nest of snakes because of the endless tangles of electrical cables that ran in every direction. They connected to hot lights, huge cameras on great booms, and a boom would be like a big long stick, and at the end would be a microphone or a camera so that they could get close to you with a camera without getting in the picture too. Tall sound equipment on silent wheels holding up long extension microphones and all kinds of new and exciting things were there. The whole set was filled with dozens of people who all seemed to be rushing around shouting orders. DJ took Coco on his chain from Alfred and Dad, who'd been waiting just off the set. They both smiled and made teasing remarks about how DJ looked in his costume, but the young man leading DJ was anxious to be off. DJ followed him around the side of the lights and sound equipment to where a man in cowboy clothes waited with a big yellow bear. "Hi," the man said, shaking DJ's hands and then motioning for the big yellow bear to do the same. Whoa, how would you like to shake hands with a big yellow bear? I'm Jake Zerka, and this is Atlas. But don't let the name fool you. He's gentle, as I hope your bear is. Hi, DJ replied. He looked quickly at the man and decided that he liked him. He wore blue jeans, cowboy boots, and a black rolled brim hat with a rattlesnake band across the crown. So across the top of it, near the top, it had a rattleskin. Woo! Rattlesnake skin, I mean. DJ glanced at Coco to see how he would react to the other bear the cub had never seen. Coco reached out a forepaw and lightly tapped the 400-pound yellow bear. DJ said, "They're going to be friends. Look, your bear is playful too." That's a relief. Sometimes working with animals can be a problem because they're still wild creatures at heart, you know. I know, DJ said. I've read about the real Grizzly Adams in history. He lived right around the corner from here in the Sierras and had a real grizzly bears for pets. But he also trapped grizzlies, and sometimes he got hurt bad by his bears. I'm glad you know about bears, DJ. Some people think Atlas is a grizzly, but he's just a plain old California black bear in spite of his color. He doesn't have the humpback of a grizzly or their color, and besides, they were much, much bigger than black bears, DJ said, showing off his knowledge a little. The last California grizzly was seen about 1922, I think it was. Well, I wish we had more time for talk, but we've got to get ready. Have you seen the script so you know what to do? Script? DJ exclaimed, his voice shooting up in fright. They told me I wouldn't have anything to say or do except walk someplace in this costume with my bear cub beside me. Mr. Zirk laughed. That's right. You're just going to do a walk-on. The director will tell you the details, but because of the animals involved, I have to be sure my part is done. Now come with me, and I'll show you pretty much what you have to do when the director rolls the camera. He rolls the camera, that would be when he turns it on. Let me adjust it just a little. It was simple. DJ decided when everything had been pointed out to him. A corner of the old warehouse interior had been made to look like a log schoolhouse. But since the frontier buildings served more than one purpose, the schoolhouse was also used for church meetings. DJ would play the part of the boy arriving at church early with his pet bear. How would you like to go to church and see somebody had a pet bear? DJ was to enter the room, stop and look around, and then walk on, followed by Coco. DJ was to sit on a backless split log pew and open his Bible. That was all, except he was to look up when the male star entered in his best clothes. Then there would be some close-up shots of the man's face when he saw the bear. All DJ and Coco had to do during this time was sit quietly, so the sound people didn't pick up any unwanted noise. Then the star would order the boy and the bear out, and they would obey. It was simple enough. So DJ nodded his understanding and stood outside the false, or pretend, log schoolroom church ready for his command. He took slow, deep breaths. Trying to calm his racing heart. He glanced around, hoping to see Dad or Alfred. But the lights blinded him. All he could see was the schoolroom that looked strange because it was open on the far side where the cameras and lights and all the cast and crew waited. Someone yelled, "Quiet on the set!" The noisy preparations sounds died away. DJ heard the other commands, but his heart was beating so fast he couldn't catch them. Then he saw the director's finger pointing at him. That was DJ's clue. He took a deep breath and began walking with Coco following behind on his left without a chain or a collar. The mountain boy's heart pounded so loudly that he thought he heard the blood pumping and thumping against his ears. He walked carefully to the door, looked inside as instructed, then moved to the split log bench and sat down. He motioned for Coco to lie down by his left foot. The bear obeyed. DJ then opened his Bible and pretended to read. "Cut!" The director's voice made DJ realize he had been holding his breath. "Kid, that was great. Just great. But let's do it again. And this time, have the cub sit down by your other knee." They did the shot over and over until DJ began to be frustrated. He thought he was doing everything just as perfect as possible. But after each take, there was a suggestion and a retake. Even Coco began to be restless. He didn't want to sit down. DJ reached down and gently pushed Coco until he sat as trained. The boy wondered what the scene must look like to Dad and Alfred, who were standing somewhere behind all those lights. The entire scene was done yet again. Finally, the director called, "That's a take. Print it." That means that time they got it right. DJ could hardly wait to get out from under the hot lights. The animal trainer met him, attached Coco's chain, and looked up at the boy. It's unusual for an animal to be so calm the first time before lights, but this little fellow seems like a natural. Did you see how relaxed he was during all this shooting? Coco's a city bear at heart, DJ said proudly, removing his itchy coonskin cap and rubbing his pale blonde hair. "A friend of mine keeps trying to get me to take him back to the forest and turn him loose. But I don't think he'd survive in the wilderness because I've had him since he was just a few months old." The trainer started leading the way back to the dressing room so DJ could remove his costume and his makeup. "What are you going to do when he gets too big to handle?" he asked DJ. The boy stopped short. Too big to handle?" "Sure. Now he weighs about 50 pounds, I guess. But in a couple of years, he'll top off at 300 pounds. Maybe more. He'll scare everyone to death when you take him to town. Every dog will feel its duty to attack your bear. The bear will swat at them too hard, and the dogs will get hurt, and people will be mad. No one will want him around. It'll get so bad that the animal control officer will be around often to tell you about complaints that he's received. And if your bear accidentally hurts somebody, especially a child, the whole community will want your bear killed." DJ stood up. He'd never thought of such terrible things. Coco wouldn't hurt anybody, ever. Not willingly, of course. Take my word for it, you've got a real rough road ahead, especially when you go off to college or the military or something and have to leave that bear behind. The truth of Mr. Zerka's words hit the boy like a tree crashing down on him. But the terrible pain that seared through DJ's body was so strong he couldn't say anything. His mouth worked, but the words didn't come. I didn't mean to upset you, but there's absolutely no way you can keep that animal around any longer than a few more months. Then what will you do? Put him in a zoo? I'd never put him behind bars like a common crook. You said he wouldn't survive in the wilderness, so that's out. What's left that's fair to you and the cub? I won't do anything, DJ cried wildly. I'll keep it with me always and forever. The trainer slowly shook his head. I've worked with big wild animals a long time, and I've seen what happens. Sooner or later, the animal goes back to the wild, or it's given to a zoo, or something like that, or it's killed. DJ shook his head violently. No, that's not going to ever happen to Coco. But even as he spoke, DJ's mind leaped to something Paul Stagg had once said about the cub he had years ago. Paul's bear had been less than a year old, DJ remembered hearing, when the cub playfully swiped a kid across the face. So he's playfully hit him and went across the face. That almost cost the child an eye because of their big long claws. Paul had no choice but to have the cub killed or given to the zoo. Paul had chosen the zoo, but the bear wasn't happy pinned up and soon died. DJ didn't want that to happen to Coco. The boy shook his head so hard that his whole body trembled and shook. But in that instant, DJ knew the truth. He had been blind to the future. He had wanted the cub so much that the boy had not looked ahead to what terrible choices he faced. The animal trainer spoke again. I'm sorry to have upset you, DJ, but you've got to face it sooner or later. Part of growing up is the pain of responsibility. But if it's any comfort to you, I'd give that cub a good home with this production company if you want to part with him. The boy glanced up sharply at Mr. Zerka's eyes. The animal trainer continued, Why, he's such a natural ham before the cameras, he might get to be a star. When you're legally old enough, you might want to come along and be my helper. Of course, we'd be gone a lot, and you'd have to give up your friends and school and take private tutoring. But you'd be near your bear. That's assuming you can convince the producer you could be put on the payroll. It's the only way I know that you can spend the next few years with Coco. DJ didn't want to hear any more. Somehow he managed to get out of his costume and remove his makeup. He took Coco's chain and almost stumbled back to where Dad and Alfred were waiting. They started asking him a million questions and saying what he looked like during the shooting of the scene, but DJ wasn't listening. That night, DJ could not sleep. He lay in bed and heard the rising wind Outside the old frame house, he heard Coco's heavy breathing. The cub was outgrowing the small rollaway bed and had started sleeping on the floor. DJ tried to pray, but the pain in his heart was so great he could only moan silently with the hurt. Oh, oh. He tried to remember something about a Bible verse that said the Holy Spirit prayed for somebody when that person didn't know how to pray for themselves. But the boy couldn't remember the verse, and he finally slipped into a troubled sleep with the hope that the animal trainer was wrong. However, the last day before Christmas vacation started, Dad drove the pickup into town so DJ could have the cub to be part of an indoor Holy Land scene. Someone had decided that since bears were mentioned in the Bible, Coco could be in Bethlehem. In the Bethlehem scene, that is, beside a few domesticated animals like cows and sheep. DJ chained Coco in the back storage room in the community clubhouse until it was time to put the cub in the pageant. DJ walked into the kitchen where the long tables were being loaded with all kinds of fruit pies, fruit cakes, regular cakes, fruit punch, and other refreshments they'd be serving during the intermission. The boy walked on in the small auditorium and took a seat Alfred had saved for him. DJ was still wrestling with the awful thoughts Mr. Zerka had brought up. The boy barely saw the people who greeted each other with Christmas joy. I love Christmas time. He didn't really hear the choir and orchestra of town people who started the program. Oh, so they had singing and music. The first community singing of a carol was interrupted by a windstorm that blew up suddenly and rapidly increased in fury. The clubhouse shook with the powerful wind. DJ looked up from time to time to see other people were also listening to the sounds. He leaned over and whispered to Alfred, "You hear that? Sounds like limbs falling on the clubhouse." "Sure loud and close," Alfred agreed. "But it's okay if the lights don't go out, or one of those big evergreen trees out there doesn't blow over on us." There were more crashes and thumps, but everyone was having such a good time the people ignored the noise and kept singing. Still, DJ was very glad when the final carol was sung at intermission. The program chairman announced refreshments would be served in the cafeteria. Then everyone was invited to the nativity scene with live animals. That would include DJ Dylan's bear. The first woman in the cafeteria let out a scream that was heard above the storm. Ah! Everyone rushed forward, squeezing in to see the reason for such screeching. DJ managed to go through the door. Then he stopped short. The refreshments were a total disaster. The refrigerator had been torn open. The huge walk-in freezer door was open and tubs of ice cream were torn with claws, and the contents, what was inside of them, was spread everywhere. "That bear did it!" a woman shrieked. "Look, his tracks are everywhere, in the ice cream, the cakes, the pies, the punch." DJ could almost feel the heat of the people's fury. Even though it was Christmas and they had been singing of goodwill among men, the sight of such utter destruction turned them into shouting, angry people. "That bear has got to go," a man shouted. "Somebody call the sheriff and have animal control officer come on and kill that wild bear." DJ was so upset he didn't recognize Alfred's touch on his sleeve for a minute. Then the skinny boy pushed back his thick glasses up on his nose, like this, and whispered, "Come on, I want to show you something." As the people shouted and yelled about the mess, DJ followed his friend across the messy kitchen floor and into the back storage room. Alfred pointed. "Look, Coco didn't break his chain. And there's his collar. See? It was cut." For a moment, DJ didn't understand. Then it hit him. "You mean someone deliberately turned Coco loose and opened the refrigerator and freezer box so he could..." That's part of what we heard and thought was the storm. But look where the tracks go. DJ saw the familiar prints, plainly visible because the mess Coco had made, and walked through. They led right out the door. Yes, but look besides Coco's paw prints. DJ bent. "Boot prints." "Exactly," Alfred cried. "Someone has stolen Coco." Oh, man. Coco didn't break loose? Oh, dear. Well, that's the end of chapter 11. Tomorrow we'll be reading chapter 12, A Race Against Time. Well, I'm not sure what's going to happen tomorrow, but you be sure and check in again tomorrow. We'll find out together. I want to remind you that I love you. I really do. And more importantly than that, God loves you, and He always will. So you have a good day or good night, depending on what time you're listening to this story. And I will be reading with you again tomorrow. Good night. God bless.